G's, no design on my jacket. Work hard, now I'm changing my bracket. Talk tough, we ain't hearing that racket. Dogs came in, you know how to stack it. Don't take it wrong, but I'ma need my ends though. I got tigers on my chest like Kenzo. Rail came, yeah, he putting that Benz though. Carol's here, man, you know he stay 10 toes. Big dog, man, you know I ain't worried. Bent up, so I'm talking real slurry. Got a blast, bro.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. This is Adam Caplan with AC Radio, the voice in your ears. Fresh off that UFC 283 in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. And it was an exciting night of fights. I mean, we had Johnny Walker versus Paul Craig, a great fight there. Both guys started off nice and slow, nice and methodical. Paul Craig did say that he needed to work on his stand-up. He did hire a new stand-up coach, but, you know, we know how that old story goes where fighters do make changes in between camps, and, you know, we're under the feeling or maybe the hope that maybe it's going to make a world of a difference in a short amount of time, but, you know, history kind of most of the time has a habit of repeating itself in the sense that it's not necessarily an enough amount of time. So, you know, when you're fighting a guy like Johnny Walker, who's 6'6", has a very explosive style, is dangerous everywhere, and you're the shorter fighter in Paul Craig with a lackingness in the stand-up game, and you're basically only a jiu-jitsu artist or known for your jiu-jitsu in the octagon, it's going to be a little bit of a tough night. And you know, what happened at first is both guys were super tentative in the sense that they were feeling each other out. Not tentative in the sense that none of them were afraid of each other, but, you know, you could tell that Paul Craig didn't necessarily have the capability to move in right away and establish his jab against a guy like Johnny Walker. And Johnny, on the other hand, has had to kind of tone down his explosiveness in the opening round, so, you know, and become a little bit more patient. So that's what we saw. And then Paul Craig made a little bit of a mistake trying to go for that takedown, or it was reversed in a clinch, I believe. And next thing you know, Johnny Walker kind of had Paul Craig pressed up against the cage with his butt facing Craig's face, and he just rained down hammer fist from behind and really fucking put a beating on Paul Craig there, pretty much hitting him in the frontal lobe, which will literally change your personality if you've absorbed enough strikes there. So that's kind of scary if you think about it. And that was all she wrote. Johnny Walker won. He'll move into the top 10 of the light heavyweight division. I think he's an exciting figure for the division. He's got a good look to him, 6'6". He could easily fight in the heavyweight division. And most importantly, I think that it's always good to see, you know, a fresher Brazilian light heavyweight coming into the division, because as we saw last night, Glover Teixeira has retired. So it's nice to see that maybe Johnny Walker will be taking the reins on that end to kind of propel Brazil maybe to a title. But, you know, we'll get to that, because I think the new champion in the 205 division is a force to be reckoned with. So after that, we had Jessica Andrade versus Lauren Murphy, and this is a controversial one. And the reason why it's controversial is that because the women are lighter and most of them don't have knockout power, but they have great speed, great volume, unlimited amounts of cardio, and most importantly, probably even the better fundamentals in every realm. Look, what makes it tough for me is that Lauren Murphy absorbed a lot of damage in the fight. She absorbed a lot of damage, and she didn't have an answer for Andrade from the opening bell to the final bell. And, you know, there was an argument on Twitter where someone said if the fight is consecutive rounds of a 10-7 or a 10-8, the fight should be stopped. Now, that's a tough one, because the thing is that if it's just a grappling fest, you know, you're probably not absorbing that much damage. You're just exhausted. You're beat up. You're broken down. You're probably on the verge of being ready to quit. But from like a neurological standpoint, you're not taking that damage. But Lauren Murphy last night was getting pieced up on the feet for 15 minutes straight. And you have to think how many times the brain was taking repetitive damage and how much her actually not being able to be knocked out was disservicing her. You know, sometimes actually getting knocked out, I don't think getting knocked out is the better of the, is always a good answer. But sometimes it is the better of the two, that over the course or the duration of the fight, you are absorbing less damage. If you get knocked out with one punch versus getting pieced up for 15 minutes, that could be over 100 to 300 strikes absorbed versus perhaps 1 to 2 of them. So, you know, I don't think ultimately head damage or head trauma is good in any way, shape, or form. But what we saw last night is very difficult. The scorecards were 30-25. Okay, that's consecutive 10-7 rounds. There is no fucking way that fight needs to continue. Okay, a piece of Lauren Murphy was left out there last night due to the fact that she's too tough for her own good, which is another common theme that we'll see in the main event from a legendary fighter who's now left us in the division. But Lauren is almost too strong for her own good, and I know that at the same time, when you're a drug addict and you come back from such things like being addicted to heroin or whatever it was, crack, crystal meth, whatever it is. Just being able to see another day and be able to fucking perform in the UFC is a win in itself. And on the grand scheme of things, the losses aren't even that bad because, like the Jared Gordon story, what he's doing now for himself and others is way bigger than any fight will ever be. But at the same time, Jared Gordon didn't take the damage that Lauren Murphy took last night. She didn't deserve that. Something needs to be said that if there was consecutive rounds of 10-7, and the significant strikes are to the head, the fight should be stopped, plain and simple. So congratulations to Jessica Andrade. She looked fucking amazing. An A1 fighter, a great look to her as usual. A charismatic fighter. She had a great embedded series appearance with Glover Teixeira. She's, obviously somebody that the fans from all around the world could get behind. And, you only want to see someone like Jessica Andrade do great for the sport. And then we move on to Gilbert Burns versus Neil Magny. And look, man, Neil Magny, great welterweight, great vet, has been riding that long fight streak that he had back in the day a few years ago now. But let's just say, guy was nowhere near the level of Gilbert Burns. Nowhere near it. Gilbert Burns has great boxing, great Muay Thai, great jiu-jitsu, and an even better fucking ground game. Fight was over before you know it. Gilbert Burns needs to get back in the mix with a big fight. I'm not against the rematch in Chimaev, not against the fight against Colby Covington, not against the fight against Masvidal, and I'm not against the fight against Bilal Muhammad. So Gilbert Burns, as Jack Harlow once said, has got options. And that is a good thing to have when you are in a tough competitive division like the welterweight division. So congrats to Gilbert Burns. Guy absolutely dusted Neil Magny. A great performance. And, congrats to Neil Magny for staying like this consistent and this relevant and this competitive in the UFC welterweights division for that many years. But I got to say, there's levels to this shit. And if Gilbert Burns didn't show last night that he has top 5 or championship level quality, like, I don't know what else this guy has to do. He's always one moment or one fight or maybe even a round away like he was against Chimaev for perhaps being victorious. So, like, congrats to Dorino. Guy's an absolute stud. And then after that, we've got the co-main event, Brandon Moreno versus Deiveson Figueiredo. And, this one was a bit anticlimactic. The way that the fight ended due to the doctor stopping it because Figueiredo couldn't see, but also due to the fact that I guess that knuckle on the thumb of Moreno kind of poking into the eye of Figueiredo, kind of leaves people a little bit like, was it even like a crazy strike that stopped the fight? It was more so like the pointiness of the bone going into the eye. It's more or less an eye poke, but it's not. It's a legal punch. So it made it anticlimactic in that sense, especially at the fact that these fights have been dragging out for years. And this was the 4th fight, and it wasn't like a real definitive fight. On the course that it was going, Moreno was going to win by decision, I believe. Absolutely. He fought great. But the way that it ended, a little bit anticlimactic, maybe at the fact that it was in Brazil as well, and the crowd was silent or basically booing and throwing beer at Moreno, made the situation a little bit worse. But ultimately, let's talk about the positives. Brandon Moreno, man, like I said, it's hard not to love the kid. Such a great kid, passionate. Remember, he was picked last in the Ultimate Fighter Flyweight Championship season. He was picked dead last. He had no shot in hell. And then you look at the future and the career that he had now, in hindsight, it's absolutely insane. So one thing that I love about Brandon Moreno is when fighters are moving away from him, he always finds a way to rip that kick to the body, wants to catch you at the end of that kick to the liver, and that really sucks the wins out of fighters, especially a guy like Figueiredo who cuts a lot of weight historically. That'll just suck the win right out of you. And that's one thing that I really feel bad about with Deiveson is that due to the fact that the fights dragged out over so many years and the weight cuts are so hard for Figueiredo, you got to think that like he would have been in the bantamweight division 2 years ago had this whole thing wrapped up definitively. And due to the fact that it didn't, he had to put so much stress and so much harm on his body that you could even see on Saturday night, he wasn't in the same shape or form that he used to be. You could see that he was a step behind. You could see that the lactic acid was building up quicker after those 2 guillotine attempts. You could also just see that Deiveson Figueiredo had ran his course in the flyweight division, and the only fucking thing keeping him there was having a rival in Brandon Moreno. And that's the beauty and the beast of the rivalry in itself, is that, you know, a part of Deiveson Figueiredo was put on hold to finish this rivalry against Brandon Moreno, and then it doesn't end definitively. So got a feel for Figueiredo, but at the same time, Brandon Moreno, how could you not like the kid? An amazing fighter, the pride of Mexico, the UFC flyweight champion. He'll fight Pantoja next for the second time. Hopefully Figueiredo, some people are calling for the loser of Chito Vera and Corey Sandhagen. I love it. Sign me up for it. I think that Figueiredo might have a bit of some difficulties in the bantamweight division. It's the biggest division, and a lot of these guys cut a lot of weight. They're big for the weight class. Figueiredo, he's like kind of a small guy or like an average size guy. So that should be interesting, but I like those 2 matchups for both of those guys next. A really, really great matchup. So next we have Jamahal Hill versus Glover Teixeira, and this to me is a really, really cool fight, because from the get-go, you could see that Jamahal Hill was ready to go against Glover Teixeira. He was mixing up his shots great. You know, he was pulling back on some of those punches of Glover Teixeira, which was a little bit risky because he stands tall, upright quite a bit, and he's got his chin up in the air, but he was still pulling back from the punches. Love the way that he was mixing up the teeps to the body to slow down and keep Glover at distance, and then following up with some head kicks. That was really good, and the head kicks really made the difference in the fight. That almost finished Glover Teixeira multiple times, but I gotta say, Glover Teixeira's defense was very impressive. And I know that he took a lot of damage and he took an absolute ass kicking and he didn't win a round. I know that. But there were a lot of difficult positions that Glover Teixeira were in that had he had not had that defense, had he had not rolled with the punches, had he had not had that shoulder roll, had he had not moved his head when he was in the turtle position from ground and pound in the later rounds, he would have gotten knocked the fuck out a lot earlier. And I attest that to that veteran capability and almost that resurgence that we've seen in Glover Teixeira, that he is just the last of a dying breed where you cannot put this guy away. And because of the Yuri Prohaska fight, we thought that maybe there was a possibility as Hill was fading that Glover would come back and get that 4th or 5th round victory. But you could just see that in every facet, Jamahal Hill was ready to die in. He had great jiu-jitsu. He had great grappling. He was great in the clinch with the knees. The knees were fantastic. Knees to the body, knees to the face. I got to say, man, Jamahal Hill is a very dynamic fighter. Doesn't come out of a big camp. Doesn't have Alex Pereira to help prepare him for a fight. The world's best kickboxer on the planet, you know, that fights at MMA right now. You know, he doesn't have that luxury. So to see how he was able to put a beating on Glover on the ground and on the feet, it was really, really impressive. And he had a question to know if he was one day built to be one of the best fighters and one of the champions of the world, and he got his fucking answer. Absolutely. Jamahal Sweet Dreams Hill is indeed one of the fucking best that we have seen right now performing recently in the 205 division since the John Jones era has ended. No doubt about that. Great jiu-jitsu. Was able to reverse himself out of a few difficult positions against Glover. Almost looked like the head and arm choke was going to sink in a few times. In your dreams, said Jamahal Hill, because at the end of the day, he was ready to go. I love the head kicks. Would have liked to see him set up the uppercut a little bit more. I think that he got a little bit overzealous in the first few rounds with the uppercut. If he would have set it up in the middle of his combinations like he was earlier in the rounds, I think that would have had greater success in the last few. But in the last few, kind of looked like he was hunting for the big uppercut, a la Anthony Rumble Johnson, rest in peace. But Jamahal Hill just really showed that he is now the 205-pound champion. He's the new lion. He is the new king of the light heavyweight division, and I'm here for it. I had Jamahal Hill winning this fight and thought he was going to get the finish, which we saw maybe a few times that would happen. But Jamahal Hill is now the champion. Congratulations to him. And this is a difficult one because we're thinking, like, what's next for him? And the thing is that you could wait for Yuri Prohaska, who's coming off one of the most gruesome shoulder injuries and thinks that he's going to get it done in 6 months, but most people are saying over a year. If I'm Jamahal Hill, and now I'm going to renegotiate to have a championship contract, I probably don't want to wait that long to get paid. I probably don't want to wait that long to step back in the octagon to perhaps get a little bit of ring rust, or maybe let my ego get the best of me that I'm now the champion while I'm sitting on the couch not preparing for anything. You know, if I'm Jamahal Hill, I'm restructuring that contract and I'm like, who's next, Blachowicz or Magomed Ankalaev? Like, yellow, let's go. Because to me, it doesn't make sense otherwise. To sit on the shelf to wait for Yuri Prohaska, I don't think that that's the move. The move is that Jamahal Hill moves on right away and tries to challenge Ankalaev or Blachowicz. Let the man get paid. Let him build himself up as a promotion. And if Yuri Prohaska is the last samurai that he says that he is, and he's over there in the fucking woods of Czech Republic meditating and getting stronger and yelling at the mountains and doing whatever fucking crazy shit he does, he'll be there in a year. So for now, let's get Jamahal Hill active, get him ready to go, because there's a lot of people out there that are hating on the 205 division. They think that it's one of those divisions where the title is going to change hands a lot and there's not a definitive champion. And I'm kind of like, I don't know, I think that's mad exciting. Like, why wouldn't you want to see the title change a bunch of hands? I understand that we always like to see a dynasty or something like that, but like after a while, you also don't like to see a dynasty. So it's kind of like damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. I think it's an exciting time for the UFC 205 division. I think that Jamahal Hill is a force to be reckoned with. Do I think that Ankalaev could be a tough matchup for Jamahal Hill? After seeing what I'm seeing against Glover, I don't know, man. I think Jamahal Hill might have the better of Anthony Smith. I think that he'll have the better of Rakic. I think he'll have the better of Blachowicz, and I think he'll have the better of Ankalaev. So that's what I got for you there. Congratulations to Sweet Dreams, Jamahal Hill. A lot going on in that UFC 205 division, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the future holds. If I'm Sweet Dreams, like I said, man, restructure that contract and get the fuck back in there. Enough with this winning the title, and now I'm sitting back and I'm chilling. I don't think that that's Jamahal Hill's mentality. I think that he is going to step back and smell the roses for a moment, but I do think we're going to see him back in the octagon, hopefully in June, maybe July. That would be cool. And, you know, that should be a very, very interesting thing. And then we have Glover Teixeira, too tough for his own good. He said it best. He literally said it best. This guy has absorbed so much damage in his last two fights. It's like unbelievable that at 42, 43 years old, he was still standing at the end of that, wanting more. If they would have told him there was a sixth round, Glover Teixeira was there. If they would have told him there was a seventh round, Glover Teixeira was there. You cannot put that motherfucker away. He is a beast. He is a last of a dying breed. You know, there was a moment in time where the prime of his career was taken away from him because he couldn't get a visa into the United States. And then you look at how much of the rest of his career that he salvaged in the last few years. It's absolutely unbelievable. Just what he's done in the last 3 years alone could be written in a movie. Then you take into course his entire career. It's fucking unbelievable. He is too tough for his own good. He could take damage and an ass kicking better than anybody I've ever seen, and he could fucking give one. That guy is the furthest thing from a punching bag. So congratulations to Glover Teixeira, who retired on the night. Another legend, Mauricio Shogun Hua, also retired. Didn't like the matchup they gave him whatsoever. I'm sick and tired of them putting older UFC veterans and MMA legends up against these younger guys who have little to no personality to even build. And then they basically get, you know, a guy who's bled for the company for 2 decades almost to get beat up in front of his home crowd against a guy who's like not even that likable and not that relevant. Wasn't happy with the matchup. Saw Helwani and a couple of the lads on Twitter complaining at the fact that a guy like Huo's a Pride veteran and a UFC veteran who also beat Lyoto Machida at UFC 113 in Montreal. I was at that fight. Amazing fight. Had a picture with Shogun that weekend too. Or I think I saw Shogun at a different event, but in Montreal. So either way, love Shogun. Guy's been around the block for a very long time. Yes, we'd like to see the pensions. Yes, we would like to see maybe a little bit of a retirement fund or a retirement pension, or at least insurance for fighters that have made the UFC's Hall of Fame. But, you know, I don't know when we're going to see that. Who the hell knows? I mean, first we just need Power Slap to end, and then maybe we'll, you know, get back to the more important things like health insurance and pension plans and shit like that, and post-career fighter care. But for now, congratulations to Glover Teixeira. Congratulations to Mauricio Shogun Hua. Brazilian legends of the game, international legends of the game. Shogun Rua was a staple in North America, a staple in South America, a staple in Asia as well. Guy ran shit in Japan. Glover Teixeira, I mean, was seen fighting against John Hackelman, who was the head coach of Chuck Liddell years ago, was so impressed by Glover Teixeira, who was the opponent of who Hackelman was coaching. He went up to Glover and said, "You come with me in California and train with the UFC light heavyweight champion Chuck Liddell, and I guarantee you one day you'll become a champion." And that's exactly what happened. He's a champion in the octagon. He's a UFC Hall of Famer. He's an MMA Hall of Famer. Glover Teixeira, one of the toughest motherfuckers out there. AC Radio, good tidings.
Big G's, no design on my jacket. Work hard, now I'm changing my bracket. Talk tough, we ain't hear that racket. Dogs came in, you know how to stack it. Don't take it wrong, but I'ma need my ends though. I got tigers on my chest like Kenzo. Rail came, yeah, he putting that Benz though. Carol's here, man, you know he stay 10 toes. Big dog, man, you know I ain't worried. Bent up, so I'm talking real slow.